I can't take you seriously if you call it Canada.
Yeah.
It's Canada. They mispronounce the name of their own capital. We used to do a quiz show on our show, and if it was a tie, we would ask the obvious question, which is, what's the capital of Canada? And I swear half the people didn't get it right. They'd be like, Toronto? It's like, no. And I can't actually remember that capital. Ottawa. So I pronounced it correctly as Ottawa. And of course, the beauty about making fun of Canada is any joke about Canada just becomes huge in Canada. Because like, oh, they're talking about us. We're on their mind. They care. And so there was all this like, oh, they can't even pronounce our capital correctly. And this First Nations guy is like, no, actually, sorry, white Canada, but it really is pronounced Ottawa. Like that's the Ojibwa pronunciation.
Yeah.
And you've been doing it wrong for 300 years. And they're like, ooh, the First Nations criticized? Sorry.
Dude.
It's so great.
I need you to have my back when I'm going against the Canadians. You chirp them so well.
No, but because half our company, we have like a lot of Canadians and a lot of Americans.
Yeah.
Because we started in Canada.
I know.
And then we moved here, obviously. But
that's the sad part. It's like everybody with testosterone is like, you guys are great, but I'm leaving. You know?
Yeah.
It's sad.
I mean, as a business, there's not much opportunity there after a certain point, right? You got to move to the States if you want to create a real business. So you want to get
rich in the United States and then buy like a huge tract of land in northern Quebec.
100%.
100%.
I don't know about Quebec. See,
everyone hates Quebec.
I'll rip on Quebec with you too.
No, it's my favorite province.
Oh, really?
Eh?
Why?
Yeah, maybe that's the issue then, right?
I'll tell you why. Because the French, super annoying, obviously impossible to deal with. Oh, you must speak our language. Your language? Nobody speaks your language. Like nobody cares about French anymore. It's no longer the lingua franca. It's like you're an empire not only in decline, but this vanished. You're Rome, like you don't exist. Okay, so there's that. But the good news about the French is they actually have, what do they call it? Self-respect. Like they actually think they have something worth preserving. That's why they're so silly about their language. Oh, you must say it in French. Like subtitles in English. And the whole thing is insane. But it suggests that they really care on some level. Like they're not bitches. Like no offense, a lot of the Anglos in Canada are like, okay, you can invade us.
Yeah.
The French are like, no, we're French. Like you can only invade us if you speak French.
Yeah.
And I just like that.
I agree.
And they're like, again, they're hard to deal with, but they have balls. I've flown all through the maritime. I fish, so I've flown in little planes all around
Where'd
Canada.
you go? Newfoundland?
Yeah, in Labrador, in northern Ontario and a bunch of your states, which I think are called provinces.
Mm-hmm.
I don't participate in that. But with your kilometers and millimeters and like, oh, this is a fake measurement.
Language.
I
know.
can't even measure anything.
I agree.
It's like, whatever. No, those are pounds and miles, but whatever. But I've flown all over in these little planes, very sketchy planes. And if you get an Anglo pilot, it's like, I can't fly today because the weather, the weather. And French pilots are like tossing the cigarette out the window, throwing on the scarf. They're like, we are not afraid of the weather.
So
the weather is transitory. Here today, gone tomorrow. But
the French
persevere.
are more like alpha.
They're alpha in their weird kind of like ass backwards French way.
Yeah.
Like in the French mind, everything is inverted. It's like in a dyslexic culture, they see everything backwards.
Yeah.
So like the most famous French quote from de Gaulle, which may or may not be true, who was of course the president of France, was, "We know it works in practice. The question is, does it work in theory?" That's like how the French think. So I'm kind of turned on by that.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
So I defend the frogs every time I go to your country.
No, but I think I think outside the major cities where it's super liberal, like now it's kind of like people are very against what's going on too. Like if you go outside the major cities,
it's
like,
not even liberal. So I totally disagree. If I can just as an outsider, like sometimes people from
I mean like
place-
opposing the way COVID was handled and stuff.
it. Like if you show up and you're like, oh,
Well, you saw that whole truck
you took
Freedom
your wife's
Convoy
last
shit.
name? Like,
No. Did they do that there?
Oh, the whole country is like,
Oh
been
my God,
completely
bro.
All
immersed.
right, now it's going too
my
far.
God.
Now it's
No,
going
I'm
too far.
serious. Like that's what it is. It's been all the dudes have been emasculated by feminist theory. So, but if you
You would never do something like that. Would you do that
Take my wife's last name?
if that was one condition?
I don't think so.
what do you mean you don't think so? The
You
answer
better not.
is I would die first, and she would hate me if I did that. And you're right. So if you actually go to Canada and you're like, guys,
That's
you
bad.
don't have to live like this. Like you took your wife's last name.
Why is that even a
Who
thing?
do you know that did that?
Yeah.
The whole country. It's like a metaphor for Canada. It's like,
I don't know one person that's done that.
No. Yeah, but they all have. Whether they have publicly or they just have in some kind of private internal arrangement. Like they've turned the country over to, they've abdicated their responsibility as men. You know that. I can't have a gun. I don't trust myself with a gun. What?
Yeah.
You don't no. I don't trust you with a gun. I trust me with a gun. And I use that to defend my family.
If you have your wife's last name, you can't have a gun.
Oh, of course you can't have a gun and you shouldn't.
Yeah.
And they know that. Like they, on some level, they know they've been naughty and silly. And if you just if you were to go to a coffee shop in downtown Toronto and say to the men there, cut off your little ponytail, shave, and like be a man, they'd be like, I hate you for saying that, but you're right.